Morning, everyone. I am Scott Van Pelt with Van Pelt and Associates. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this call. I'm glad to see many of you whom I already know, and those that I haven't met yet. Looking forward to meeting you in person, hopefully soon. Since Karen and I joined our practices about 10 months ago, it's been a great experience getting to know a lot of her clients. We do hold all these educational meetings throughout the year on different topics and such. Today is on Social Security. We do have, we are located in Rockville, Maryland, and Montana, Delaware, to better serve your needs, and look forward to meeting all of you here pretty soon. I do want to quickly introduce the rest of the team. Karen Poor, as you know, Ellen Donahue, Blair Fetzer, Andrew Dans, Jimmy Lorenko, Tracy Volpe, and Lacey Hopper. All of us are here to be a resource to you for your success. A couple quick housekeeping rules or items to cover. All the lines are going to be muted. You could, if you have a question, please raise your hand feature and we'll unmute you to ask a question. Or you can send in a chat. I think our chat feature, we're working on getting that up. So you can also do it that way to send in a question and we'll ask it on your behalf. This is going to be more of an interactive conversation with David. So looking forward to that. This call will be recorded and also be available on our website in the next week or so. So we are pleased to have David Freitag join us today. He's going to be covering Social Security and helping us understand the different filing strategies that one can use for Social Security. David is currently a financial planning consultant with the Advanced Concept Design Group for MassMutual. He is a chartered life underwriter, a chartered financial consultant, and a chartered retirement planning consultant. So Dave, thanks very much for your time, and the show is yours.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for inviting me to have this wonderful discussion today. Obviously, with presentations like this, we go to a slide deck, so I'm going to make sure you can see this okay. Is he able to see that all right? Let me just pull this up. Oh, great. Okay. There are two major decisions that people need to make as they approach retirement. First, what am I going to do about Social Security? And second, what do I do about health insurance? Those are government-based programs, and there are time-sensitive decisions. Today, we're going to talk about that Social Security question. Maybe some other time, Scott, we can drift over into the health insurance side of this whole thing. But let's focus in on Social Security. And oh, by the way, the only reason I use this picture is to show what neckties look like. Scott, remember we used to wear those things back in the day?
That was back in the day.
Yeah, that was back in the day. But what we're going to do together over the next course of an hour is sort of, I'm a bit of a buff about history. Now, how do we get here from there? And particularly, you're in Rockville, Maryland. You know, I went to the University of Maryland. I lived in Rockville for a long, long time. So I know where you are, and I think it sort of blends itself to sort of looking at history to find out where we came from. I want to talk about Social Security today, answer the big elephant in the room question, you know, is it going to be there in the future? Filing strategies, Scott, to your point, you know, there are different strategies that people can look at. Things that you need to consider personally that I'm going to call them homework. Little things that you need to make notes about. You might want to take a couple notes as we go along. Scott, we're going to be distributing these slides to everybody on the call.
That's correct.
There's some important links here that people will want to make a note about. And finally, we'll kind of wrap it up. The only bad question is the one you don't ask. So let's make sure we jump in. Now, you know, this is sort of the mandatory compliance slide that we always have to use, but this is actually a very important one. The red part in the middle of the slide, I want to talk about just for a second. Yeah, Scott, do you remember the day when your mother a few years ago had that wind up timer with a bell on it she put next to the stove? Remember those things? You would wound them up.
Yes.
I can remember clearly my mother doing that. Of course, now those are gone and we have iPhones and timers and electronic things. But when you make a Social Security election, you wind that button on the timer or you push the button on the iPhone and the alarm goes off in a year. When it goes off, making a change to that filing decision becomes very, very difficult. So I'm so glad, Scott, that we were able to put this together. We want folks to make the decision the right time, the right one the first time. And I use this saying all the time. We want you to make the decision on purpose and not by accident. So, okay, so how do we get here? How did this whole thing start? Well, there we are, United States Capitol, August the 14th, 1935. You know, Scott, if you looked at this particular picture, is there anything that would make you hold up your hand and say, hey, Dave, I want to ask you a question? What do you think that question would be?
What is going on?
Yeah, what is going on? Well, FDR is signing the bill, but the question you'd ask is all these guys are there, but there's a very important difference. There's one woman, and that woman is Frances Perkins. Now, Frances Perkins, as it turns out, was a very forward-thinking sort of, I would guess, personality in New York State, knew FDR when he was the governor of the state of New York. And FDR was so impressed with her vision about the future, he appointed her to the first woman to hold a United States cabinet position. And she held it longer than anybody else as the Secretary of Labor. But the reason she's in the picture is that Frances Perkins and a few of the folks on her team wrote the law. Now, if that's all she did, that is a titan in American history that nobody's ever heard of. But Frances Perkins gave us unemployment compensation. Here we are coming off the tail end of a pandemic, something I never thought I would live through. And think about how important unemployment compensation was for folks during that time. How about workman's comp, the minimum wage, abolishing child labor, starting the CCC? These are enormous contributions to society. And Frances Perkins was the one that's responsible for that. For those of you who want to take a little drive down to Washington, D.C., if you're on Constitution Avenue, between the White House and the Capitol over on the left side, you come to 200 Constitution Avenue. That's the Department of Labor. It is now the Frances Perkins Building. So it had very, very early starts back there in 1935. Took them a little while to get things set up. And by 1937, they began to pay benefits from the Social Security system. And the first benefits, interestingly enough, were lump sum payments. And the recipient of that first lump sum payment is our good friend Ernest Ackerman here. Now, Scott, you may or may not know the answer to this, but how much do you think Ernest received? Was it $95, $19, $8, or 17 cents as that lump sum payment that's going to last for the rest of his life? What would you guess?
I'm going to go for 19.
Well, that'd be a good guess. Wouldn't be the right one, but 17 cents is the actual answer. And you can say, well, how in the world, Dave, could possibly, Ernest get 17 cents? And the truth is, he retired shortly after he started paying FICA taxes into the system. To put 17 cents in perspective, however, Ernest could have ambled down to the local post office and could have bought, in those days, a first-class stamp for 3 cents. Times have clearly changed. And also the philosophy of paying a lump sum benefit was never going to make it as a retirement income program. So by 1940, everything had morphed into an annuity, a check that's paid every month for as long as you live. And our good friend Ida Mae Fuller here was the first recipient of that annuity check. Now, Ida Mae, I'm up here in Boston, not too far away. She's in Ludlow, Vermont. She was paid this particular check after participating in the Social Security system for 3 years, and she retired. She generated $22.54 in benefits for the rest of her life. But the reason Ida Mae is so important is that Ida Mae knew the secret sauce that makes annuities work, and that's longevity. Ida Mae lived till she was 100 years of age. And for 35 years, she received over $22,000 of benefits from her Social Security contributions. I'm going to ask you all to think about longevity in your own family. You're going to see how important it really is in making a good Social Security filing decision. Fortunately for Ida Mae, she was on the winning side of that. But that was 1940. That was back when the whole thing started. So Scott, you would want to hold your hand up and say, well, where are we today, Dave? I mean, what's going on? And the answer is we started with very few folks, and now there are 65 million people receiving a check every month from the Social Security system. And the crazy thing about this is it's not just a retirement program. Too many people forget about the fact that it is really a comprehensive package of benefits. It has a disability income provision. So if you can't work, there's 9 million of those people who couldn't work. They're getting benefits from Social Security. And in fact, it's also a form of life insurance. 6 million people receiving benefits from survivorship benefits. Scott, I don't know that you know this. My wife received Social Security when she was 3.5 years old. How is it possible somebody 3.5 could get a Social Security check?
Probably because one of her parents passed away.
Correct. She lost her father. Lost her father when she was 3.5. Those Social Security checks that were paid to my wife and her sister, her mother was a single working mother, helped sustain that family. So think about all these 65 million people who are receiving benefits. That's $95.41 billion a month being paid out to participants in this program. And Scott, if you multiply that times 12, would you have a really big number?
Huge number.
Yeah, it's north of $1 trillion. This is the biggest single program in the entire federal system. This is not an insignificant operation. It's a big deal. And everybody's going to say, well, how in the world do we fund something this big? It's done with payroll taxes, FICA payroll taxes, Federal Insurance Contribution Act. You can look on your paycheck stubs or when you do your income tax, and we're getting into that time right now, where you're going to look at these contributions you're making. These are payroll taxes, not income tax. Income tax is used for the rest of other things in the federal system. The payroll taxes are dedicated to two specific benefits. One, Social Security program, and the second, Medicare. 6.2% of your income matched by the employer, 6.2% pays for the Social Security side of this. Now, if you're self-employed, you pay both sides of that tax. But on top of that is 1.45% is covering the cost of prepaying for Medicare Part A. So you roll it all up, that's 15.3%, some of it going to Medicare, some going to Social Security. And there's a big difference between the Medicare component and the Social Security component. And down at the bottom, you see this 160,200, Scott? See that number?
Yes.
Okay, that's a super important number for everybody on this call to remember, because you pay the FICA tax, the Social Security component, up to the 160,200. After that, you don't. You pay the Medicare tax on everything. So big, big difference in the way this tax works out. But that $160,200 number is being indexed. You can see it was a 9% increase up from 2022. We expect that to increase over time. So what happens to all of this money? It's a tidal wave of cash that comes floating into the system. And as we mentioned, over $1 trillion of revenue came into the system. In 2021, over $1 trillion, $1.145 billion went out to retirees, people who are disabled, or people who are in the survivorship program. But fortunately, back in 1983, when they restructured the cost of, Scott, do you remember who was president in 1983? Ex-governor of the state of California, remember him?
Reagan.
That'd be Ronald Reagan. And of course, when I come from Boston, we use this term with a hallowed accent. Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. And Reagan and Tip O'Neill knew that there was structural problems wrong with the Social Security system. So they got together and hired an unknown business consultant up on 16th Street. And that was Alan Greenspan. And they called it the Greenspan Commission. They put it together. They figured out how to do stuff. And one of the things those guys in the commission decided is that we got to collect more money than we need, because those pesky baby boomers are one day going to hold up their hand and want benefits from the system. So they were carrying a huge balance, and that huge balance went into the Social Security Trust Fund. And right now in the trust fund, there's just shy of this is with a T, trillion dollars in the trust fund, which we started to tap into at the end of last year. Now the money just doesn't sit there. It's earning, being invested in government bonds, essentially look like US Treasury, 10-year Treasury bonds, 2.5% plus or minus is the interest rate on that. The contributions back into the trust fund come from that interest, come from the FICA tax, and interestingly enough, income tax on the benefit. So lots of folks paying into this particular system, but now more people are taking money out than the money that's coming in. And you may have read some of the articles in the media. You probably heard the President of the United States talk about this during the State of the Union address. There are structural changes in the future coming to Social Security. But Scott, let's do a quick role play here. You ready for this?
Sure.
Okay. Let's suppose you decide you want to run for Congress and you're very popular and you're very good at it. You get elected and you rise in prominence and success. And there you are at 2034. You now stand behind that big gavel in the House of Representatives, that big podium, you got that big gavel in your hand, and you bang it down and you announce to now, let's say, I don't know, 75 million people, that you're going to do an across the board benefit cut of 20%. Scott, do you want that job?
No.
Does anybody on this call want that job? That is a political impossibility. And what's going to happen is what's happened in the past, and that's a bipartisan commission, essentially what Reagan and Tip O'Neill did, and they got Alan Greenspan to figure out what to do. And there's only two sides of this equation that we can wrestle with. Let's talk about the revenue side and talk about the benefit side. Scott, is there anything sacred about that earnings cap, that $160,000 number? You think that could go up?
Most definitely.
Yeah. In fact, we've run focus groups here in Boston to offer them opportunities to say, well, what can we do to fix everything? And that's the first thing that's on the table. Yeah, I think we're going to see an increase in the earnings cap. What about the 6.2% contribution rate? Is there anything sacred about that?
No, I don't think that's locked in either.
That's not locked in either. So those are the levers that they can pull on the revenue side, but you can take this one to the bank. The French have just gone through this, if you might have remembered. But what about an increase in the retirement age? Is that a possibility? For sure. Has it happened before? For sure. When my father applied for Social Security, his definition of full retirement was 65. Mine happens to be 66. There could be many of you on this call who are 67. So that's a trend that I think we can bake into this formula. And the other one is some sort of adjustment to CPI funding. There's going to be some changes. But if we just blew Social Security up, one entire generation of people in this country would lose up to 50% of their retirement income. It is an impossibility. It's going to get fixed, and I'm very confident that it will. So what are the basics here? How do you get into the club? Get into the club by earning something called a credit. $1,640 earns you a credit. You can only get 4 credits in a year, so when you make $65.60 this year, 2023, you've earned your 4 credits. Now, the amazing thing about the way this was structured is you have to qualify with 40 credits to get into the retirement club. So it takes you 10 years to get there. But that has nothing to do with how much you're going to take out of the system. That's based on the highest 35, not consecutive years of income, the highest 35 years of income. Not like the government, we have a high 10, high 5 formula, different pension plans. This is the highest 35 years. And the more you pay into the system, the more you'll take out of the system. So keep that in mind. Now, 2 definitional terms. If you got a little piece of paper, you want to write some stuff down to remember from our call today. First is your full retirement age. I was born between 43 and 54. So my full retirement age is 66. If you're born from 1960 or later, your full retirement age is 67. You could be, though, in a transition period. And we're in the middle of that right now with many people who might be on this call when there's a difference between your calendar year birth date and your Social Security birth date for full retirement age. So let's take Mary as an example. She was born in 1958, let's say January. That's her calendar year birth date. Her Social Security birth date for full retirement age is going to be in August. Why is that full retirement age such an important number to remember because that's the fulcrum. Hey, Scott, you remember back in the day when they had playgrounds and they had teeter-totters or seesaws? You remember those days?
Oh, yes. Love
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, they were great. The fulcrum in this analogy is your full retirement age. Think about that seesaw or teeter-totter. If you put the fulcrum there in the center, taking benefits prior to your full retirement age will cause them to be reduced. If you take benefits after your full retirement age, will cause them to be increased. So it does anchor every one of these calculations, and everyone needs to know their full retirement age. So Scott, where do you fall on this grid? I'm going to guess it's 67.
67. Actually,
Yeah.
probably later now.
Yeah, good. So remember, write that one down. Now, how much you get out of the system is really driven by four things. Obviously, when you start, how much did you pay in? Interestingly enough, marital status. And finally, what did Ida Mae Fuller teach us? How long you live. The biggest wild card on this screen right now is longevity. And you have to get your arms around that to figure out a good, correct filing decision. We do know that most of the people who take Social Security benefits based on data through the end of last year filed on or before their full retirement age, many of them well before their full retirement age, which sets up a discussion about this particular graphic. So remember, let's take a Mary in this case whose full retirement age is 67. $1,000 a month is Mary's benefit. What would happen, Scott, if Mary took benefits at 62? Should she get the $1,000? The answer is
No,
no. She gets
discount
700.
rate.
She gets 700. The reason she gets 700 is it's going to pay her for a longer period of time. Now, let's suppose Mary decides, no, I'm not going to take the benefits at 67. I'm going to take them over here at 70. Doesn't get 1,000. She gets 1,240. It's a 77% spread between 62 and 70. So what kind of folks, Scott, do you think would be attracted to take benefits early from Social Security?
If they're needing the income.
Yeah,
Support the
if they need the
lifestyle.
money, You know, we have come through this horrible pandemic where people said, I got laid off, I got furloughed, I need access to the cash. We went through the financial crisis when the dot-coms blew up. We went through the Great Recession. People used Social Security as that safety net where they had to go in and take the benefits, and that's okay. There are two really important reasons to take Social Security early. One, I'm not well, I've got health concerns, and two, I need the money. But let's go to the flip side, Scott. If that's the reason to take it early, what would be the reason to defer it?
You don't need the assets.
Correct.
You're still working.
Still working,
So,
healthy as a horse, you know, you're doing well. You've got the opportunity here to defer and earn the fabled delayed retirement credits. Now, those delayed retirement credits are 8% simple interest increase from this. You can see it right there. See, 1 year, get an 8% bonus. Simple, not compounded interest, which allows you to then get a larger check. And again, all of this relates to longevity. Okay, how do you find out what your benefit's going to be? SSA.gov. And by the way, if you haven't been there lately, go today. Everything is different on this particular website. It's very much task oriented. It's extremely consumer friendly, and you can be able to click on some links that will take you, and you can sign in and get the amount of your projected benefit from the socialsecurity.gov website. And if you do that, it's going to ask you to create an account, a My Account. Easy enough to do. Scott, I'm assuming you have a My Account, correct? You've done that before in the past.
I haven't signed in there recently, but I have, yes.
Yeah. And do you remember how long it took to do that? It's not too long, right?
Not long, no.
Yeah. You have
Very
to answer
simple.
some questions about, you know, where did you live? Did you ever drive this kind of a car? You ever have this kind of a credit card? I mean, it's a lot of security that's built into this. But a My Account is mandatory for you for lots of different reasons. But the first reason is you can then generate the full Social Security statement. Now, in the past, back in the dark ages, when I lived back in Rockville, when you did this, you got the green line form. Well, that form is now in a display case in the Smithsonian. You can't get that anymore. What you're going to get is the blue bar form. And the blue bar form, to my way of thinking, is a huge increase in functionality and information being made available to you as a contributor to the program, because now you can see what the benefit would be each year if you started at 62, incrementally all the way out to 70, and realize the value of those delayed retirement credits. And think about this over here. This is a hot link that if you have some questions will take you right back to the appropriate page on socialsecurity.gov. So it's important not only to know what your benefit's going to be, but if you flip this blue bar form over, you'll come to your earnings history on the back. And you'll be able to see the contributions that you're making into the Social Security system. Now think about this for a minute, Scott. Over a 35-year period of time, is it at all possible that there might be an error in the amount that's recorded to the Social Security system based on your earnings? What do you think the probability of that is? Will it never happen? Could happen.
It's probably happened several times.
It happens all the time. And you can see at the top of the blue bar form, they know that. It says, oh, if you find an error, call us or click on this link, because you have to let us know. Now you have 3 years, 3 months, and 15 days to fix this. If it's longer than that, the government wins. How often, Scott, or what time of the year, Scott, would be a good time for someone to check their earnings history? What do you think?
Around their birthday, I would say.
Birthday'd be good. How about when you file your income tax?
Um,
Yeah, maybe the beginning of the year, end of the year. So everything is syncing up. I use this expression kind of whimsically. More often than you change the batteries on your smoke detector, this thing needs to be checked all the time. My son was exposed to an error on his. If we have, and we have a lot of people on this call today, which is great. I'm going to guess 3 or 4 of you have errors on your earnings history. Download the My Account form, get a copy of the statement, look at your earnings history, and remember there's a limited period of time to get that fixed.
And that's a good
Listen,
point, David. David, sorry to interrupt, but they
I
don't
want you
send
to.
paper. They don't send out the paper forms anymore.
Correct,
So
they do
this
not.
is the only way to access your Social Security figures.
If you're over 60, you might get them, but you need to be checking them prior to age 60. You need to be looking at this. This is your Social Security bank account statement. You want to look and see that everything's going well. But let's do another role play, Scott. You ready for this one?
Sure.
Okay. So you got your iPhone there in your hand. You see this message that somebody called. And just like everybody, you say, well, I wonder who called me. It's got a Washington, D.C. number on it. And here's what the message sounds. Scott, this is David Freitag calling from the Social Security Administration office in Washington, D.C. I want to advise you that your Social Security number has strange activity in the state of Texas. You're clearly subject to a fraud investigation. Immediately call 800-236-472. Thank you. Now, Scott, if you got that call, what would you do?
I wouldn't call it back.
No, you would erase it immediately. It's part of a national scam, and the Social Security Administration is aware of that. You know, when I started working out of my house in the beginning of COVID, I was getting calls from the Federal Reserve. I was getting calls from the Social Security Administration telling me all of these horrible things that were going on. And if you have a My Account with your own unique user identification name and a password, you isolate yourselves from the thieves who are trying to get access to your records. So very important for lots of reasons to have a My Account. A, you can find out what your benefit's going to be. And B, you can isolate yourself from the thieves who are trying to get the money. Okay, let's talk about longevity. You know, we got this from the New Yorker magazine. Everything's great until it isn't. You know, some folks are going to be leaving us. And at the end of the day, you need to know what that longevity projection looks like. And if you want to go to a very basic longevity calculator, there's one on SSA.gov. Put in your sex, put in your birthday, you get kind of a projection. But that's not really the best longevity calculator. Probably the best one is the family history, mother, father, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers, your own lifestyle. Those kinds of things would probably give you a better handle on longevity. But you have to have a handle on it to make a good filing decision. All right, let's talk about filing decisions. Let's take Bob and Mary here. 62, knocking on that door for Social Security. Bob's benefit, let's use some of these terms. Full retirement age benefit for Bob is $2,900. Mary's is $2,000. All right, she entered the workforce a little bit later. So this is a hypothetical example. And what we do and what Scott's got access to is a software tool that takes all of these variables, which to me are kind of like the Rubik's Cube that frustrated everyone in our past, take these variables and drops them in. So let's drop these variables into our tool. And we have 2,800 here for Bob, 2,000 for Mary. Then we're going to ask Bob and Mary, what kind of longevity does your family have? And Bob says, pretty good. 90 probably. Mary, women live longer than men, maybe 92. We're going to express these numbers and these values in today's dollars. We'll discount them back so you know what they mean, and we'll build in an inflation benefit for these particular benefits over time. Many of you are aware that this year, 2023, we had the highest increase in Social Security payments, 8.7%, almost in history, certainly the highest in 40 years. And that's an important factor. Notice we can't illustrate more than 6, and we never illustrate really more than 2.5. But when we adopt that data, we end up developing this bewildering green graphic that's going to show us that Bob has 9 choices from 62 to 70, and Mary has 9 choices from 62 to 70, which means as a married couple, you have 81 different ways to take Social Security. Which one's the right way? Notice that the difference between these benefits, these are the extremes, in today's dollars, over $300,000. Ah, okay. Maybe that's not the right decision to take benefits at 62. Remember, make the decision on purpose and not by accident. So here's Bob and Mary. They go, well, what about 67? Does that make some sense? It might. If we look at that, it's certainly better than 300,000. That delta is just under 100,000. Everyone is different. Everybody, I would argue, needs to go through this exercise that model an optimum time and an optimum age combination to collect Social Security benefits. And watch what happens. Let's suppose they decide to file at 67. Bob's going to get 3,100. Mary's going to get 22. That's $5,400 a month coming to them from Social Security for the rest of their life. Now, let me ask you this, Scott. If I ambled into your office today, where is it? Where exactly is your office, by the way?
I'm in Rockville.
Okay, well, where in Rockville? Because I used to live there.
Oh, Gaither Road.
Okay.
Right
so,
off Shady Road.
Okay, so I walk into your office there in Rockville, and I say, Scott, I'd like you to guarantee me $5,400 a month in the form of an annuity, increase it each year for 2%. Would I have to write you a big check to get that to work?
Yes, you have to have enough.
Well north of $1.5 million, probably.
Probably, yes.
You're looking here, everyone on this call, an asset in your back pocket that is $1 million plus asset. Think if I walked Scott into your office and I had a suitcase with me and I plopped it down. And you said, Dave, what's in that suitcase? And I opened it up as $1.5 million in cash. Would you just casually put it over in the corner and we go to the coffee machine?
Yeah.
Probably
No.
not. What are we going to do with $1.5 million? Everybody on this call has that kind of an asset. And watch what happens over time. Here's 89. Bob and Mary and I getting $9,300 a month. Many people say that's impossible. No, it's not. These numbers are being locked in to formulas created by the system. They're getting $9,300 a month, and the very next day, Bob leaves. And Mary's household income comes from $9,300 a month to $5,500 a month. Scott, let me just ask you a crazy question. Is this possible? Could this happen to somebody?
Absolutely.
It's 100% certain. Yeah, absolutely is the right answer. This income loss is going to affect every married couple who's taking Social Security benefits. And you cannot plan for this income loss when you're 85 or 86 or 87. You have to plan for it over here. And there's lots of wonderful ways to fill up this gap, but you got to do them now. You can't do them later. If you knew, I use this analogy, if they were giving out tickets to the Titanic and you didn't know what was coming, you'd probably take the ticket. But we know what the ticket's going to lead to. This ticket is going to be a substantial decline in income. And there are strategies, and Scott is very gifted at putting these strategies together to help you solve those problems. So keep that one in mind. But let's call about something that's evolving, and it's called the split strategy. We're seeing this more and more. If we're going to take Bob and Mary, and they decide, well, I'm not going to do this 67 thing. Bob says, I want to delay and get those great delayed retirement credits. But Mary, on the other hand, said, I'd kind of like to have money a little bit sooner. How would that work? Well, here's Mary now filing 67. Remember, Bob's going to wait to 70. She's getting $2,263 a month. And that could be a significant contribution to their quality of life. Maybe trips to see the grandchildren. Maybe it's to pay for weddings. Maybe it's to fix the roof or the water heater that blew up. A lot of different things that could happen with this $2,200 a month. But then Bob shows up. He gets $4,300 a month. Together now, they're getting $6,600 a month, and that increases over time. And oh, by the way, that allows Mary to get the maximum survivor benefit someday when Bob leaves. It's the higher of the two checks that's the winner. This split strategy is becoming much more popular. And when you compare these strategies with the graph, you can see why it's becoming much more popular. The green line is they both file at 62. They're not going to do that. The dark blue line is they both file at 70. Probably not going to do that. But the light blue line is that Mary would go sooner. And if Mary goes sooner, the delta over a period of time isn't that big, and it doesn't occur until the late 80s. So you need to, again, come back to that expression we used before. Make the decision in purpose, not by accident. Find out what your choices would be and see which one is the best. And everybody's different. Now, in the past, divorced spouses had lots of access to their ex-spouse's record. Not so much anymore. There are a few things to check. You still have to be single, married for 10 years, divorced at least 2. Now, with the change in the law, we're looking at divorced spouses who have small benefits relative to big benefits. So Nancy here has a small benefit. Her ex-husband, Alan, has a big one. Could Nancy leverage this access to spousal benefits from Alan's record? And the answer is yes, she could. We first pay her own benefit on her own record, $1,160. But she can get a maximum amount of 50% of Alan's full retirement age benefit, which means she could get a supplement from Alan's Social Security record of $580 a month. You might qualify as a divorced spouse for leverage against whether it's the man or the woman, or the 2 women, 2 men, doesn't make any difference. An ex-spouse, there could be leverage there. And you need to take a look at that and refine that. I call it the bridge strategy. Remember, everyone's entitled to 50% of the FRA amount in a marriage situation, and this spousal benefit provides that bridge to the 50%. All right, the file and restrict strategy is gone. This is pretty much be done by the end of the year. So basically, we don't have that available for us to use. Okay, what about surviving spouses? This is an important one. Callie loses her husband, Bill. We lost over 1 million people with COVID. We didn't expect to lose. In fact, Callie loses Bill. Well, what could Callie do? How could she leverage the survivor benefit in Social Security? And the answer is she would actually take benefits from Bill. Bill's record would pay her until her full retirement age. And then at age 70, flip the switch and move over to her own record, which might allow her to get over $100,000 more because she was able to invoke this particular strategy. Remember, it's a situational thing. The rules change. Spousal benefits are not the same as survivor benefits. And again, you need to know how those things work. Take a look at this graph. You can see what a difference this makes for Callie. The benefits for Bill are coming until she turns 70. And look at that bump up. She now gets that big increase. And that increase is really a gift from Bill that allows her to get that maximum benefit for the rest of her life. Substantial modeling strategies.
David,
All right,
if you go back, sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
If you go back, how long does a widow have to file for their deceased spouse?
Well, again,
Their time
prior to full retirement age, the earnings test could be an issue, which we'll get to here in a minute. You need to be able to provide a death certificate. You got to provide a marriage certificate. You got to provide identification. When you get those, you can apply. If you go past that for other reasons, the retroactive window for Social Security filing strategies is 6 months. So you really don't want to miss the window. You want to make sure you do the right thing. So you need to address this question. If you've got clients, if a client's lost a spouse, you need to get that strategy figured out. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. So hopefully that's a summary. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good, thanks.
Okay, great. Let's talk about single people, our friend Michelle here. You know, single people is pretty simple. It's really a question of health and financial need. If Michelle's not healthy and needs the money, she should file early. If Michelle is healthy, doesn't need the money, she might want to wait to full retirement age or maybe defer all the way out to 70. If she has longevity, there's a huge difference between 785,000 and $1,000,001. So you can see that this is going to be a very unique. Everybody's different. You just cannot make this as a casual decision. All right, some other things to think about. Let's go. How about the dreaded earnings test? There's a barrier put in front of people who want to take benefits before their full retirement age, and that's called the earnings test. When you go over this year, $21,240, for every $2 over that, the Social Security Administration holds back $1. Now, Scott, let me ask you a question. Is that held back money lost forever, or is there a way to get it back?
There's probably a way.
Yeah, it'd be good if there was a way to get it back, and there is a way to get it back. At full retirement age, you get it back, but you don't get it in a lump sum. You get it incrementally, an incremental increase of your benefit for the rest of your life. And if you don't live to life expectancy, you'll never get it all back. But if you do, you will. But this is a huge issue. I have lots of folks who initially said, gee, I'd like to take Social Security. It'd be nice to have a couple $1,000s a month coming in, but I'm still working. I'm making $75,000 or 100 or more. The earnings test is going to remove that benefit from that decision. It's not going to happen. In the year of your full retirement age, it's a little bit better, 56,520, a 3-for-1 relationship. But if there's one rule of the 2,800 rules that I deal with in the Social Security system, this is one that you might want to remember, that if you're working full time, taking Social Security early isn't such a good idea. It just doesn't work. So keep that one in mind. Let's go to taxes. Remember, we're starting into April, 15 days to true up here. Social Security could be taxed as income. Well, how does that work? The formula was defined by the IRS as defined income. Remember, 1983 is when they introduced the idea of taxation. By 1985, they figured out how to do it. The IRS comes up with this combined income, which is adjusted gross income plus non-taxable interest plus half of your Social Security. You add those numbers up, and if they're over $44,000, you're going to be reporting up to 85% of your Social Security as income, as if you were working. Now, the interesting thing here is you never report more than 85%, and in fact could be reporting substantially less. Now, keep in mind, so Scott, if you took $1 out of an IRA, a traditional one, how much would you report? The answer is here on the screen.
1%.
All of it. But the maximum you would ever report at the federal level for Social Security is 85. There's always a 15% advantage on the Social Security check, which means these dollars buy more in retirement. These are valuable dollars because of taxation. And at the state level, I live in Massachusetts, you don't pay income tax on Social Security in this state. Maryland, you don't either. Virginia, you don't. If you want to, there's a transition, by the way, going on in West Virginia as we speak, where some of that's grading out. But if you really want to pay income tax on Social Security, you can move to Vermont and figure that out. But remember, highly tax favored payments coming from these checks. Now, let's put some of this together. It's not always just about the money, right? It has to conform to other things that you do. Health concerns, longevity. Are you going to continue to work? The earnings test. All of those things are significant things to think about. And remember this saying, one size fits one. There is no universal answer for Social Security filing. Just because Uncle Lou at the family picnic said this is what he did, doesn't mean that's what you should do. This has to be fine-tuned just for your unique situation. and answer this big question. And this is an exercise we're going to ask you to do. Not now, but take a piece of paper. Yellow pad would be okay. Something from the copy machine. Upper left corner, write down everything you need. Must have, necessary expenses. Housing, food, clothing, healthcare, all that stuff. Lower left corner, stuff you'd like to have. Trips, supporting grandchildren, education contributions, lots of things that people in their 60s and 70s want to do, what you like to do. And over in the upper right corner, you're going to write down all the stuff that you know is predictable. And the dominant answer in almost every case of predictable income is going to be Social Security. Now, you could have pensions, you could have access to, you're in Rockville, Maryland, we're going to have government folks taking pensions. They're very solid, fortunate people that have access to those things. You might own annuities that would pay guaranteed predictable income over a period of time. But you need to quantify that number, which is why this exercise is so important, because the Social Security answer is going to dominate the other decisions that you make in an income plan. And we have a software tool, again, Scott's got access to this, where you can take a kind of an x-ray of your financial future. Very easy to fill in, doesn't take long at all. You know, when do I start Social Security? Should I start at 67, 69? And now dynamically model those decisions in context of everything else that you have going on. And whether this is rental property, a trust, income, it could be money in qualified accounts. Washington, D.C., the thrift savings account, fabulous opportunity. Working, not working, life insurance benefits, how do those work? It's important to be able to model all of those things in real time to kind of get that x-ray of your financial future. Is this a financial plan? No. Financial plan I would be the MRI. This is sort of the diagnostic x-ray of what the future looks like. And you may want to enjoy this experience just as well. So Scott, we're going to get to some homework. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Scott, should everybody have a My Account?
Absolutely.
Right. How hard is it to set up, Scott? Tell me again.
Not hard at all.
Not
I
hard.
can do it, and anybody can do it.
Yeah, everybody can do it. How many times should you be looking at your Social Security statement, Scott? Yes.
At least once a
Yeah.
year.
Are they at least once a year? And you want to make sure you're checking it out to see what's going on. Should they verify the earnings history on there? Yes,
Yeah.
right? If there's an error, how long do they have to get it fixed? 3 years, 3 months, 15 days, right? Because you're on this call, everybody knows your full retirement age. Scott, you know yours, right? I know mine. What about health concerns, family, plans? Those are different for everybody. In fact, when we ask people to model retirement, the most difficult question is, how much do you need? You know, that one with a star on it. Projecting your income. Not an easy thing to do, but it's something you need to do. And remember, taking Social Security and stopping working are two different discussions. And famously, you want to talk with your tax advisor, because for many cases, the Social Security income could push them into a different tax bracket. Maybe that's a reason to defer, or maybe it's not. So again, lots of moving parts, lots of questions that needs to be answered. And there are ways to get answers to some of this stuff. SSA.gov, fabulous website. Got to go take a look at it. In the past, when we had pandemic issues, the only way you could get in touch with the Social Security Administration was call the 800 number. Thankfully, they have now reopened the local offices. And I'm sure, Scott, they've got one right there in Rockville, where you could walk in if you wanted to go in, visit, talk with some folks, you'd be able to do that. But what I suggest is that you get in touch with Scott and his team, because that will allow you to have these kinds of discussions, model the benefits, and see how they go.